The message arrived at 2:17 a.m., sharp and sudden, cutting through the silence of Ian's small apartment. He was still awake, staring at lines of code on his laptop. Chasing a deadline that no longer mattered, his phone buzzed once on the table. He picked it up without thinking. "I'm sorry, I had no choice." That was all it said. The name above the message froze him in place. Samir. For a second, Ian thought it was a joke, some late-night nonsense. Samir had a habit of being dramatic. But something felt wrong. The tone, the timing, the stillness. That followed. Ian's fingers moved fast. He opened their shared banking app. His breath slowed, then stopped. The balance was zero, not reduced, not delayed. Gone. Every rupee they had built together over 3 years, investments, client payments, savings wiped clean in one move. Ian refreshed the screen again and again, as if the numbers might come back out of pity. They didn't. His chest tightened. But no sound came out. No anger, no shout, just a strange, hollow quiet, like the world had stepped back and left him alone in a place that didn't feel real. He checked the transaction details. The transfer had been made an hour earlier. Authorized, clean, planned. Samir hadn't made a mistake. He had chosen this. Ian sat back slowly, his mind racing through every memory, every moment that now felt like a lie. Late nights working side by side. Cheap meals shared on the floor. Plans about the future spoken with full belief. They had built something together. Or at least, Ian thought they had. His phone buzzed again. He stared at it, but didn't open it this time. It didn't matter what the next message said. Nothing could explain this in a way that made sense. He stood up and walked to the window. The city outside was asleep, quiet and unaware. Nothing had changed out there. Cars still passed. Lights still glowed in distant buildings. The world kept moving. Only his had stopped. Hours passed without him noticing. He didn't sit. He didn't sleep. He just stood there holding the phone in his hand like it might burn him if he let go. By morning, the shock had settled into something colder. Understanding. Samir was gone. The days that followed moved fast, but felt slow at the same time. Ian made calls, sent messages, checked every place Samir could be. No response. Samir's apartment was empty. His office desk was cleared. Even his social media accounts went silent. It was like he had erased himself overnight. Ian tried to focus on facts instead of feelings. He went through emails, contracts, files, anything that could give him a clue. What he found made things worse. Samir had been planning this for weeks. There were quiet changes in documents, small shifts in account permissions, conversations with clients that Ian had never seen. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't panic. It was careful. That realization hit harder than the money being gone. This wasn't betrayal at a moment of weakness. This was betrayal built step by step. Ian stopped looking for answers after that. He already had them. News spread quickly, but not in a way that helped him. Within a week, announcements started appearing online. A new company, a bold launch, fresh branding, strong investors. The founder's name was clear. Samir Khan. Ian stared at the screen, reading every line like it might change if he blinked. It didn't. Samir was smiling in the photos, confident, successful, as if nothing had happened. As if Ian had never existed. The comments were full of praise. People admired the growth, the ambition, the story of success. No one knew the truth. Or maybe they didn't care. Ian felt something rise inside him then, not loud, not explosive, but steady and sharp. Anger. Calls from clients started coming in. Not to support him, but to leave. "We heard about Samir's new venture. It makes more sense for us to move forward with them. It's just business. You understand." Ian listened without arguing, without explaining. He knew how it looked from the outside. Samir had the resources now, the momentum, the image of success. Ian had nothing. Each call closed another door. Each message ended another connection. By the end of the week, the business they had built was no longer alive. It had been replaced. At home, things were quieter than ever. The apartment felt larger, emptier, like it no longer belonged to him. He stopped working, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know what to work on anymore. The laptop stayed closed. The phone stayed silent. Time passed without shape or purpose. One evening, as the sun faded behind the buildings, a small voice broke the stillness. Uncle Ian looked down. Zayd stood in the doorway, holding a toy car in his hand. His eyes were curious, but careful, like he sensed something he didn't understand. "You're not busy?" Zayd asked Aya and shook his head. Zayd walked in slowly and sat beside him on the floor. He didn't speak for a moment. He just played with the car, rolling it back and forth. "You don't smile anymore," he said finally. Ian looked at him, unsure what to say. "I'm just tired," he replied. Zayd nodded, as if that made sense. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "I made a wish for you." Ian blinked. "A wish?" Zayd smiled slightly. "Yeah, I ask that you feel happy again." The words were simple, light, but they stayed in the air longer than expected. Ian forced a small smile. "That's a good wish." Zayd seemed satisfied. He stood up and ran out of the room, leaving Ian alone again. But something had shifted, not enough to change how he felt, but enough to make him notice it. That night, Ian didn't look at the messages. He didn't check the news. He sat in the dark, thinking not about the loss. Not about the business. But about Samir. Why? The question kept circling in his mind. Samir wasn't desperate. He wasn't struggling. They were growing, slowly but steadily. There had been no signs of fear, no pressure that Ian could see. So why take everything? The answer didn't come, but the question stayed. And with it, the anger grew sharper. Not wild, not out of control. Focused. Aya stood up and walked to the window again, just like the night before. The city looked the same. But he didn't. The shop was gone. The confusion was fading. In its place, something stronger was forming. A need, not just to understand, but to respond. The betrayal had taken everything from him. His work, his trust, his sense of stability. But it had also given him something in return. Clarity. Samir had made a move. Now it was Ian's turn to decide what came next. He didn't know how yet. He didn't have a plan. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't stay broken. And he wouldn't forget. Because some actions don't just end a story. They start a new one.